The massive council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a structure so ancient that no living species remembered who built it. Inside, delegates from 47 different alien civilizations had gathered for an emergency meeting. Something unusual had happened, something that hadn't occurred in over 3,000 years. Ambassador Rachel Hayes sat quietly in the human section, adjusting her translator device. Earth had only joined this galactic community 20 years ago, right after humans figured out how to travel faster than light. Compared to the other species here, some of whom had been exploring space for millennia, humanity was basically the new kid in class. The lights dimmed, and a hologram materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed a message from the precursors, mysterious beings so old that even the oldest civilizations considered them legends. They rarely spoke to anyone anymore, preferring to watch from the shadows of the galaxy. A voice filled the chamber, seeming to come from everywhere at once. It sounded tired, ancient, like wind blowing through empty corridors. The words were simple but carried weight that made everyone lean forward in their seats. We addressed the Galactic Council with a warning. Do not provoke the species called humans. They possess something rare in this galaxy. They exceed conventional limits. This is not advice. This is a warning. Ignore it at your peril. The message ended. Silence filled the chamber for a long moment. Then Admiral Thorne of the Vorten Empire stood up. He was massive even by alien standards, with thick scales covering his body and 4 powerful arms. His species had ruled a huge chunk of the galaxy for the past 1,000 years, conquering dozens of other civilizations along the way. He laughed. The sound echoed off the crystal walls like breaking glass. Is this why you summoned us? A mysterious warning about primitives. Thorne gestured toward Rachel dismissively. The humans discovered space travel barely 2 decades ago. They control 5-star systems. My empire controls 200. Their most powerful warship would lose to one of our patrol boats. Other delegates began murmuring in agreement. Counselor Vex, a reptilian creature who managed the trade routes, nodded his long head. With all respect to Ambassador Hayes, this warning seems rather excessive. Humanity is harmless. Backward even by generous standards. Rachel felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd heard this kind of talk before. To these ancient species, humans were like children playing with toys, thinking they understood the universe. She stood slowly, feeling every eye in the chamber turn toward her. Maybe beings who've lived for thousands of years know something you don't. Thorne's laugh was harsher this time. Or maybe they've grown senile hiding in whatever corner of space they've retreated to. The precursors haven't interfered in galactic affairs for generations. Why should we listen to them now? He activated his own holographic display, showing a map of Vorten territory. My empire has been expanding steadily for a millennium. We've absorbed species far more advanced than humanity. We've conquered worlds with weapons your people can't even imagine. And now the precursors want us to fear you? He turned to Rachel. No offense, Ambassador, but your entire species is barely a footnote in galactic history. The debate continued for hours. Rachel sat through it all, listening to species after species dismiss the warning. They brought up statistics, military comparisons, technological assessments. On paper they were absolutely right. Humanity was small, weak, and insignificant compared to the galactic powers. Finally, Counselor Vex called for a vote. All those in favor of dismissing the precursor warning as unfounded? 39 delegates voted yes. Only 8 voted no. The warning was officially ignored. Rachel watched Admiral Thorne as the session ended. He was already talking with his military advisors, pointing at star maps. She recognized the systems he was highlighting. Human colonies. Her people's homes. Earth's territory sat directly in the path of Vorten expansion. The Empire had been slowly moving in that direction for years. The only thing that had slowed them down was uncertainty. Now, with the Council's dismissal of the precursor warning, that uncertainty was gone. After the session, Rachel walked to the precursor communication terminal. It was dark now, silent and cold. She pressed her hand against the smooth surface, knowing they probably couldn't hear her but needing to say it anyway. Thank you for trying to warn them. I just hope the galaxy survives learning this lesson the hard way. Back on Earth, President Mitchell Davis received Rachel's report in his office. He stood at the window looking out at the lights of the capital city below. General Amanda Price stood beside him, reading through the council transcript on her data pad. They dismissed it completely, Amanda said quietly. The Vortens are already moving ships toward our border. Mitchell nodded slowly. He was thinking about his daughter, who lived on New Haven Colony with her family. About the 8,000 civilians there who'd left Earth looking for a fresh start among the stars. About all the humans scattered across 5-star systems, building lives, raising children, dreaming about the future. What are our defensive capabilities at the outer colonies? He asked. Minimal. Commander Tyler Brooks has 12 patrol ships at New Haven. They're converted civilian vessels with basic weapons. Against a Vorten fleet? Amanda shook her head. It wouldn't even be a fair fight. How long until they reach our territory? 5 days, maybe 6. Mitchell turned from the window. Start quiet mobilization. Don't cause a panic, but get our shipyards ready to shift to military production. Contact every ship captain, every engineer, every factory manager. Tell them it's just a precaution. Sir, if the Vortens are really coming, then we'll deal with it. But I want to be ready. He looked back out at the city. The precursors warned the galaxy about us for a reason. Maybe it's time everyone learned what that reason is. 5 days later, Admiral Thorne stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Around his ship, 500 Vorten warships moved in perfect formation. It was the largest battle fleet assembled in a generation. His second officer, Commander Krex, approached with a data pad. Admiral, final intelligence reports on the human colonies. New Haven has minimal defenses. Their largest military presence is 12 patrol ships. Projections show we can occupy all human territory within 2 weeks. Excellent. Thorne studied the tactical display. Make sure every ship has orders to broadcast our approach on all channels. I want the humans to see us coming. I want them to understand that resistance is futile. Sir, wouldn't a surprise attack be more effective? Thorne smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This isn't just about conquest, Commander. This is about sending a message to the entire galaxy. The precursors filled these humans with delusions, made them think they were special somehow. We're going to correct that error very publicly. When we're done, no species will ever again question Vorten authority. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, heading toward human space. Thorne felt satisfied. This would be quick, clean, and decisive. A demonstration that would remind the galaxy why the Vorten Empire dominated this region of space. He'd ignored the precursor warning. In a few weeks he'd prove they were wrong. He had no idea he was about to learn why ancient beings who'd seen civilizations rise and fall had tried to stop him. Commander Tyler Brooks had been stationed at New Haven Colony for 3 years, and most days were pretty routine. He'd chase down the occasional smuggler, help ships with engine troubles, maybe deal with some pirates trying their luck in the outer systems. Nothing too exciting. That morning started like any other, with Tyler drinking terrible coffee in the command center while reviewing patrol schedules. Then Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh looked up from her console, and her face went completely white. Commander, you need to see this. Now. Tyler walked over, coffee mug still in hand. His screen showed what looked like a wall of red dots approaching their system. He blinked, thinking the sensors were malfunctioning. Nobody traveled in groups that large unless they were going to war. How many ships are we looking at? He asked, setting down his mug carefully. Jennifer's voice shook slightly. 517 contacts, sir. All of them are broadcasting Vorten military signatures. They're not even trying to hide. They'll be in weapons range in 40 minutes. Tyler felt his stomach drop. He commanded 12 patrol ships. Well, they were basically civilian vessels with some guns strapped on, crewed by people who'd signed up thinking they'd be helping lost freighters and scanning asteroids. Nobody had trained for this. Nobody had even imagined this. Give me a channel to the Vorten fleet. All frequencies. And somebody wake up the governor. Tell him to start evacuation procedures. The main view screen flickered to life, showing an alien face that Tyler had only seen in training videos. Admiral Thorne looked even more intimidating in person, his scales glinting under the bridge lights of his massive flagship. Human Commander, I am Admiral Thorne of the Vorten Imperial Fleet. You will immediately evacuate all colonies in this region and surrender control of these systems to the Vorten Empire. You have 1 hour to comply. Tyler tried to keep his voice steady, professional. Admiral Thorne, I'm Commander Tyler Brooks. Sir, these are civilian colonies. We have families here, children. Surely we can discuss some kind of arrangement. If you give us time to contact our government, I'm sure we can work something out. Thorne's laugh cut him off like a knife. Work something out? You really don't understand your situation, do you? This isn't a negotiation, Commander. This is a notification. Your people should have stayed on Earth. The precursors filled your heads with fantasies about being special. Let me show you reality. Tyler saw the weapons on the Vorten ships begin charging. His blood turned to ice. Admiral, please wait. The first missiles hit New Haven Station without any additional warning. Tyler watched in absolute horror as the station just vanished in a flash of white light. 1,200 people lived there. 1,200 people who were just going about their morning, probably drinking coffee like he had been, maybe getting their kids ready for school. Gone. Just like that. No, Jennifer whispered beside him. Oh God, no. The second volley hit the mining platform where Tyler's sister Emily worked as an engineer. He could see it breaking apart in slow motion, huge chunks of metal tumbling toward the planet's atmosphere where they'd burn up. Emily had called him just yesterday, excited because she'd finally saved enough to visit Earth next month. All ships, fall back immediately. Tyler heard his own voice giving orders, somehow staying calm even though his hands were shaking. Civilian transports, begin emergency evacuation. Military vessels, form a defensive screen between the transports and that fleet. We buy them every second we can. His 12 little ships scattered, trying to position themselves to protect the fleeing civilians. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with a paper shield. The Vortons didn't even bother with formations or tactics. They just methodically picked off each human ship like they were shooting targets at a practice range. The horizon exploded first, hit by 3 missiles simultaneously. Tyler had played cards with Captain Rodriguez just last week. The Endeavour went next when its reactor overloaded, and the explosion caught 2 civilian transports that were too close. Families, children, all gone. Tyler's ship, the Defiant, shook violently as something hit their shields. Alarms screamed from every console. The impact threw him across the command deck, and he tasted blood in his mouth as he pulled himself back up. Status, he shouted over the noise. Jennifer was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but she stayed at her post. Main engines are gone, sir. Life support is on emergency power only. We've lost 7 ships. The civilian transports are scattering, but Vorton fighters are chasing them down. Through the viewport, Tyler could see New Haven's surface. The colony where 8,000 people lived. Where his niece went to school. Where people had gardens and parks and lived normal, peaceful lives. The Vortons were bombarding it systematically, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. Sir, incoming transmission from the Vorton flagship. Admiral Thorne's face reappeared on the damaged screen. He looked pleased with himself. A noble effort, Commander Brooks. Pointless but noble. I'm going to let you survive this encounter. I want you to go back to Earth and tell your leaders what happens when primitive species forget their place in the universe. Tyler's voice came out as a growl. You're murdering civilians. There was no threat here. We were trying to negotiate. You didn't have to. Of course I didn't have to, Thorne interrupted casually. But I chose to. You see, Commander, this is a lesson. The precursors warned everyone that humans were dangerous, that you exceeded limits or some such nonsense. I'm demonstrating the truth. You're just another weak species that will either submit or be eliminated. Nothing special at all. The transmission cut off. Tyler watched helplessly as his remaining ships tried desperately to protect the fleeing transports. Then space seemed to ripple, and 3 human cruisers suddenly appeared, dropping out of faster-than-light travel with their weapons already firing. They weren't enough to win, not against 500 Vorton ships, but they provided cover for the evacuation vessels. All remaining ships withdraw to Rally Point Echo, a voice came over the emergency channel. It was Captain Rodriguez from the Earth Defense Fleet. We can't save the colony, but we can save the people. Move now. Tyler's ship limped away on emergency power, barely able to maintain life support. He watched New Haven burning behind them. The colony his sister had called home. The place where families had been building a future among the stars. The Vortons were broadcasting the whole thing across every channel in the galaxy, making sure everyone saw their great victory over the weak humans. On Earth, the footage played everywhere. In government buildings, on news networks, in homes across the planet. People watched New Haven die in real time. Watched civilians murdered while trying to evacuate. Watched humanity's first real contact with the greater galaxy turn into a massacre. President Mitchell Davis stood in the emergency command center, surrounded by military leaders and civilian officials. The room was completely silent except for the sounds of New Haven's destruction playing on the main screen. He saw families running for shelter. Saw buildings collapse. Saw the mining platform where Emily Brooks had worked breaking apart. General Amanda Price was the first to speak. Her voice was cold, controlled, dangerous. Mr. President, I'm recommending full military mobilization. Everything we have. Every ship, every factory, every resource. Mitchell nodded slowly, unable to look away from the screen. Agreed. Get me a direct line to every colony, every national leader, every ship captain in human space. Within the hour he addressed all of humanity. His message was broadcast to every human settlement, from Earth to the furthest colonies. The Vortons wanted to teach us a lesson today. They wanted to show the galaxy that humanity is weak, insignificant, unworthy of respect. They murdered 3,000 of our people to make their point. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried steel. So we're going to teach them a lesson in return. We're going to show them what happens when you awaken something that refuses to die quietly. The Vortons think they understand limits. They're about to learn that humans don't believe in limits. The response was immediate. Civilian shipyards began retooling for military production within hours. Merchant vessels reported to the nearest military stations for weapons upgrades. Scientists dropped their research projects to work on military applications. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers faster than they could be processed. In homes, schools, and workplaces across human space, people painted 3 words on walls, on ships, on memorial stones. 3 words that became a promise and a threat. Remember New Haven. The Vortons had wanted to make an example of humanity, to prove the precursors wrong, to demonstrate their power to the galaxy. Instead, they'd done something far more dangerous. They'd given humanity a reason to fight. They'd awakened something the ancient precursors had tried to warn them about. They'd made an enemy of Earth. 3 months into what Admiral Thorne thought would be a 2-week campaign, he stood alone in his private quarters staring at reports that made absolutely no sense. Every military model, every strategic calculation, every piece of historical data said the humans should have surrendered by now. Their industrial capacity was tiny compared to the Vorton Empire. Their population was smaller. Their technology was generations behind. Yet somehow, impossibly, the Vortons were losing. Thorne pulled up the latest battle report from Crimson Station. A human mining colony with practically no defenses had held off an entire Vorton battle group for 3 straight days. When the colony finally fell, the cost was staggering. 47 Vorton ships damaged. 12 completely destroyed. Over 6,000 casualties. For one mining colony. The report included footage from the battle. Thorne watched it for the 5th time, trying to understand what he was seeing. The human defenders had used mining equipment as weapons, strapping explosives to automated drones and flying them into Vorton formations on remote control. When Vorton ships tried to shoot down the drones, the debris caused even more damage. It was insane. It was wasteful. It worked. His door chimed. Commander Krex entered, looking worse than Thorne had ever seen him. The younger officer's scales had lost their shine from stress and lack of sleep. More bad news? Thorne asked, already knowing the answer. Krex nodded wearily. 3 supply convoys hit overnight in different sectors. The humans are using civilian freighters equipped with military weapons. They look harmless on our sensors until they're close enough to fire. We lost 47 supply ships. Thorne slammed his fist on the desk. How are they coordinating attacks across multiple sectors simultaneously? Our intelligence says they don't have the communication networks for this kind of operation. They're improvising, sir. Using everything from commercial satellites to reprogrammed maintenance drones. Our analysts can't predict their movements because they're not following any recognizable military doctrine. They just keep adapting. Thorne pulled up another file. This one detailed Captain Lisa Morgan, a human pilot who'd become a nightmare for Vorton commanders. Before the war, she'd been a test pilot for experimental spacecraft. Nothing remarkable. Now she commanded a squadron the humans called the Ghost Riders, and they'd personally destroyed more Vorton ships than some entire fleets. The file included combat footage that made Thorne's blood run cold. Morgan's fighter dove into a debris field at speeds that should have been suicidal, weaving between chunks of destroyed ships with centimeters to spare. 3 Vorton fighters tried to follow her. 2 collided with debris and exploded. The 3rd lost track of her completely. Then Morgan did something that defied physics. She used a piece of wreckage as a gravity slingshot, whipping around it to reverse direction impossibly fast. The G-forces alone should have killed her. Instead, she came out of the maneuver firing, taking out 2 more Vorton ships before disappearing back into the debris field. She flew through a radiation burst, Krex said quietly, pointing at another section of footage. Right here. Her ship's alarms were screaming about lethal exposure. She used it as cover to get behind our command ship and destroyed its communication array. What happened to her? Thorne asked. Medical treatment for radiation poisoning. She was back in combat 3 days later. Thorne stared at the screen. 3 days. A Vorton pilot would have been hospitalized for weeks, possibly permanently grounded. This human woman treated it like a minor inconvenience. The next report was somehow worse. A human soldier named Kevin Webb had been captured during a ground assault. Injured and alone, he'd been imprisoned on a maximum security vessel. Standard protocol. Completely routine. 72 hours later, Webb had escaped. Not just escaped. He'd sabotaged the ship's main reactor, disabled security systems, stolen classified intelligence on Vorten fleet positions, and hijacked a shuttle. The entire cruiser was now drifting in space, powerless and requiring months of repairs. How did one injured human do this? Thorne demanded. Krex pulled up security footage. Watch. He made tools from items in his cell. A food tray. A water pipe. Pieces of his uniform. Then he used a ventilation shaft we never considered a security risk because it's too small for a Vorten. The footage showed Webb crawling through the narrow shaft, clearly in pain from his injuries, pulling himself forward through sheer determination. He reached an engineering junction and began working on Vorten systems with his improvised tools. He had no training on our technology, Krex continued. He figured it out through observation and experimentation. In 3 days he learned enough to sabotage an entire military vessel. Thorne felt something he hadn't experienced in his long career. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Because the pattern was everywhere. Humans weren't just fighting back. They were evolving during the war itself, learning and adapting at a pace that shouldn't be possible. On Earth, Dr. Nathan Foster ran a laboratory that had been converted for military research. Before the war, he'd been studying theoretical physics, working on problems that might have applications decades in the future. Now he was leading a team that was reverse engineering captured Vorten technology in weeks. This is impossible, his colleague Dr. Rebecca Collins said for the 10th time that day. We've had this shield generator for 14 days. The Vortens spent 40 years developing it. Nathan looked up from his work, eyes red from lack of sleep. Rebecca, everything is impossible until somebody does it. The Vortens had 40 years of peace to develop this. We've got people dying every single day. That changes what you're willing to try. He pulled up a holographic blueprint, highlighting several key components. See here? The Vortens designed this assuming certain limitations. Power consumption, heat dissipation, structural stress. But those limitations are based on Vorten materials and Vorten safety standards. So we're not Vortens. Our materials have different properties. Our safety standards are different because human physiology is different. If we modify the power distribution here and increase cooling efficiency here, we can boost output by 40%. Yes, it runs hotter than Vorten safety protocols allow. But human pilots can tolerate higher temperatures, and our ships have better heat shielding. Rebecca studied the design, her mind racing through the implications. This would give our ships a real advantage in combat. Exactly. Get it to production. I want prototypes ready within 2 weeks. Nathan was already moving to his next project, a captured Vorten weapon system spread across his workbench. What else can we break apart and rebuild better? The same scene was playing out across human space. Engineers worked around the clock. Factories operated at capacities that safety regulations said were dangerous. Civilians volunteered for risky experimental procedures. Every defeat taught humanity new lessons, and they adapted faster than the Vortens could counter. Captain Lisa Morgan stood in a hangar bay, briefing her squadron for their next mission. The Ghost Riders had lost 3 pilots in the past month, but volunteers lined up for the chance to fly with her. She looked at the faces of her pilots, seeing exhaustion and determination in equal measure. Intelligence says there's a major Vorten supply depot in the Kelter system, Lisa began. It's heavily defended. Orbital platforms, patrol squadrons, the whole package. Command says it's too dangerous for a strike. Her pilots grinned. They knew what was coming. So naturally we're hitting it. But we're not going and shooting. We've got captured Vorten identification codes. We're going to fly right in pretending to be a damaged patrol group requesting emergency repairs. By the time they figure out something's wrong, we'll have explosives planted on every fuel tank and ammunition depot. Lieutenant Jake Harper raised his hand. Captain, if they catch on before we're done, we'll be trapped deep in enemy territory with zero backup. Lisa's expression hardened. Then we don't get caught. Look, every supply depot we destroy means fewer weapons firing at our homes. Every Vorten ship we take down means our families are safer. The Vortens think they understand what's possible. Our job is proving them wrong. The mission went exactly as planned. The Ghost Riders flew into the heavily defended depot broadcasting fake distress signals. Vorten security waved them through, directing them to repair docks. Lisa's team deployed with equipment cases that looked like standard repair gear but were packed with high-grade explosives. 20 minutes later, the Ghost Riders undocked and burned for the edge of the system. Behind them, the depot erupted in a chain reaction of explosions that destroyed enough supplies to support a Vorten battle group for 6 months. Admiral Thorne watched footage of the explosion from his flagship. Another devastating loss. Another impossible human victory. He pulled up casualty reports from the past 3 months. The numbers were staggering. The Vorten military had lost more ships, more personnel and more territory in 90 days than they had in the previous century of expansion. "Sir," Krex said carefully, "perhaps we should consider negotiating a withdrawal. The economic cost alone is crippling our empire." "Withdraw?" Thorne's voice was dangerous. "The Vorten Empire doesn't withdraw. We've conquered species far more advanced than these humans. We just need to." "To what, sir?" "Every tactic we try they counter within weeks. Every advantage we deploy they neutralize or copy. They're not fighting like any species we've ever faced. They're fighting like they've got nothing to lose and everything to prove." Thorne stared at the tactical displays covering his walls. Red zones marked human operations throughout Vorten space. Supply lines that looked like shredded cloth. Production facilities offline. Fleet elements scattered and demoralized. The precursors had warned them. He'd laughed at the warning. Now his entire empire was paying the price because humans had one trait that no Vorten strategic model had accounted for. They refused to accept that anything was impossible. 6 months after what was supposed to be a quick victory, Admiral Thorne sat in an emergency meeting with the Vorten High Command. The room was tense, filled with military leaders and government officials who all wore the same expression of disbelief and growing panic. High Chancellor Drax stood at the head of the table, his 4 arms gesturing angrily at the holographic displays showing the state of the Empire. 17 major shipyards offline. Supply lines cut across 40 systems. Our military spending has exceeded the annual budget by 300%. Admiral Thorne, you promised us this would be a simple conquest. A demonstration of power. Thorne's scales had dulled from stress and lack of sleep. The humans are not fighting conventionally. They refuse to engage our main fleets directly. Instead, they strike our infrastructure, our supply lines, our production facilities. They're turning this into a war of attrition. Then adapt. Drax slammed his appendage on the metal table. You're our supreme military commander. Find a way to defeat these primitives before they bankrupt our entire civilization. But Thorne knew something he couldn't admit to the High Command. The humans weren't primitives anymore. They'd evolved during the war, learning and adapting at a speed that defied everything he understood about military development. Every advantage the Vortens possessed, humanity found a way to neutralize or copy within weeks. It was like fighting an enemy that got stronger with every punch you threw. On Earth, President Mitchell Davis gathered his senior staff in the war room. The mood was completely different from 6 months ago. Then they'd been desperate and afraid. Now they were tired but determined. General Amanda Price stood before a massive tactical display showing the current state of Vorten forces. The Vortens have pulled back most of their fleets to protect their core systems, Amanda explained, highlighting several key locations. Their homeworld, primary shipyards, government centers. Admiral Thorne is playing defense now, trying to protect what's left of his empire. Mitchell studied the display carefully. We can't assault their core systems head-on. They still have numerical superiority in those regions, and we'd lose too many ships. Agreed. So we don't go to them. We make them come to us. Amanda zoomed in on several strategic points. We hit targets they absolutely cannot ignore. Their remaining fuel refineries, the supply hubs that keep their home fleet operational, the communication relays that coordinate their defenses. We make it look like we're preparing for a major offensive against their homeworld. And when Thorne responds? We'll be ready. We lure them to Theron's Gate, a system with complex gravitational anomalies and dense asteroid fields. The terrain favors our smaller, more maneuverable ships. Meanwhile, Captain Turner's raiders cut off their retreat and reinforcements. Mitchell nodded slowly. Casualties. Amanda's expression grew serious. We'll lose people. But fewer than if we let this war drag on another year. The Vortens are getting desperate, and desperate enemies do unpredictable things. Then we proceed. But make sure every captain understands the mission parameters. I won't send our people into a suicide mission. They already understand, Mr. President. After New Haven, everyone knows exactly what we're fighting for. 3 days later, human forces struck across multiple systems simultaneously. Captain David Turner led his raider group against a critical fuel refinery in Vorten space. His ship, the Relentless, had become legendary among both humans and Vortens. Wherever it appeared, vital infrastructure mysteriously exploded. David stood on his bridge, watching the refinery's defenses activate as his small fleet approached. His first officer, Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell, highlighted the defensive setup on the tactical screen. Sir, 12 orbital defense platforms, 24 fighter squadrons, and 3 heavy cruisers protecting the refinery. This is the most heavily defended facility we've hit. Which is exactly why we're hitting it, David replied calmly. If we take this out, their entire home fleet loses operational range. They'll be stuck defending their core systems with limited mobility. How do we get through those defenses without getting vaporized? David smiled slightly. We don't go through them. We go around them. He pulled up a navigation chart. There's a civilian shipping corridor that passes close to the refinery. We forge civilian identification codes, join the traffic flow, and we're inside their defensive perimeter before they realize we're hostile. That's crazy. If they scan us, they won't. They're watching for military vessels approaching from outside their defenses. We'll be civilian freighters already inside their perimeter. By the time they figure it out, we'll have charges planted on every major fuel tank. Ryan stared at the plan, then slowly grinned. You know what? That's just crazy enough to work. The operation went perfectly. The Relentless and her escort ships merged seamlessly with civilian traffic, their forged codes accepted by automated security systems. They docked at the refinery's commercial loading stations, and teams moved out carrying what looked like standard cargo containers but were actually packed with military-grade explosives. 23 minutes later, David's ships undocked and accelerated toward the system's edge. Behind them, the refinery erupted in a spectacular series of explosions that could be seen from the planet's surface. The facility that had powered a quarter of the Vorten home fleet's operations was gone. Admiral Thorne received the report while reviewing his defensive positions. His hands trembled slightly as he read it. The Kelter refinery? That was our primary fuel supply for the home fleet. Without it, our operational range drops by 60%. Commander Krex looked equally shaken. Sir, there's more. Human forces are massing at Theron's Gate. Intelligence indicates they're preparing for a major offensive against our core territories. Finally, something that made tactical sense. A conventional military engagement. Thorne felt a surge of hope. This was the kind of battle he understood. Numbers, firepower, traditional tactics. Assemble the home fleet. Every available ship. If the humans want a decisive battle, we'll give them one. We still outnumber them 3-1. We can end this war today. Admiral, Theron's Gate has dangerous gravitational fields and asteroid formations. It's not ideal terrain for our larger vessels. Which is why the humans chose it, Thorne acknowledged. But superior numbers will overwhelm their tactical advantage. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. It was exactly what the humans wanted him to think. Captain Lisa Morgan reviewed the battle plan aboard her command ship one final time. The Ghost Riders would be the bait, drawing the Vorten fleet deep into Theron's Gate where the asteroids and gravity wells would disrupt their formations and negate their numerical advantage. Remember, she told her squadron over the comm channel, we're not trying to win the initial engagement. We're trying to make them commit everything. Draw them in, make them think they're winning, then scatter when the main fleet arrives. Captain, what if they don't take the bait? Jake asked. They will. Thorne needs a decisive victory. He's desperate to justify this campaign to his superiors. When he sees our forces, he'll think he can finally crush us in open battle. He'll commit everything. The Vorten fleet arrived right on schedule. Over 300 warships, the largest concentration of military power the Empire had assembled in decades. Admiral Thorne stood on his bridge, studying the tactical display. Approximately 100 human ships waited in the asteroid field. Outnumbered 3-1. All ships advance, Thorne commanded. Attack formation. We end this today. The Battle of Theron's Gate began with the Vortens advancing in overwhelming force. Lisa's squadron met them head-on, fighters weaving through the asteroid field with practiced precision. The Vortens followed, confident in their numerical superiority. But the asteroids and gravitational anomalies that the humans had studied for weeks began working against the Vorten formation. Their larger ships struggled with the complex gravitational effects. Their tight formations broke apart as they tried to navigate the hazardous terrain. Now, Lisa ordered, execute scatter pattern. The human ships dispersed in all directions, using asteroids as cover. Vorton ships tried to pursue but found themselves spread out, their formation collapsing. And then the rest of the human fleet arrived from multiple vectors, using the asteroids to mask their approach. The new weapons that Dr. Nathan Foster's team had developed, missiles that could penetrate Vorton shields, turned the battle into chaos. Vorton ships that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves vulnerable. But the real shock came from behind. Captain Turner's raiders emerged from faster-than-light travel directly behind the Vorton formation, cutting off their supply ships and any hope of reinforcement. The Vortons were trapped in a system designed to favor human tactics, suddenly outnumbered where it mattered most. Admiral Thorne watched his fleet disintegrate. Ships that had never known defeat were burning or fleeing in panic. His own flagship shuddered under repeated impacts, systems failing across the board. "Sir, we've lost over 40% of our forces," Commander Krex reported, his voice barely steady. "If we stay, we'll lose everything. We need to withdraw." Thorne stared at the tactical display, watching human ships move with perfect coordination, exploiting every weakness, turning every Vorton strength into a liability. The precursors had warned them. He dismissed it as superstition. Now his empire was paying the price. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "General retreat. All ships withdraw to home territory." The mighty Vorton fleet, pride of an empire that had dominated the galaxy for 1,000 years, limped away from Theron's gate broken and defeated. The humans had won not through superior technology or greater numbers, but through sheer determination, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept the limitations everyone else thought defined them. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the impossible became reality. Humanity had broken the Vorton Empire. The Galactic Council chamber felt different when Ambassador Rachel Hayes walked through its doors. 6 months ago, these same delegates had dismissed humanity as insignificant primitives. Now, every representative in the room stood as she passed. Some showed respect. Others showed fear. All of them understood that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Admiral Thorne sat in the section reserved for those seeking the Council's judgment. The once proud military commander looked like a shadow of himself. His scales were dull, his posture defeated. The Vorton government had stripped him of his rank and authority, desperate to distance themselves from the disaster he'd created. Councillor Vex called the session to order, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Ambassador Hayes, the Council recognizes the human delegation. We are assembled to discuss terms of peace between the Vorton Empire and humanity." Rachel walked to the central platform, looking out at the assembled representatives. She thought about New Haven, about the 3,000 people who died in those first terrible minutes. About Commander Tyler Brooks, who'd watched his sister die and could do nothing to stop it. About every family torn apart by a war that never needed to happen. 3,000 of my people died at New Haven," Rachel began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "The Vortons broadcast their deaths across every channel in the galaxy. They wanted it to be a lesson, a demonstration of power. They wanted to show everyone that humanity knew its place." She activated a holographic display showing the moment New Haven Station exploded, the mining platform breaking apart, the colony burning under orbital bombardment. Every delegate watched. Nobody looked away. In the months that followed, we lost 15,000 more. Soldiers and civilians. Parents and children. The Vortons lost even more. Tens of thousands of their people died too. None of these deaths needed to happen. The precursors warned you this would happen. We tried to negotiate. Admiral Thorne chose violence. Rachel turned to face Thorne directly. "Your empire could have been our friend. We could have traded, learned from each other, explored the galaxy together. Instead, you decided we were primitives who needed to be conquered. You thought you understood limits. You were wrong." She paused, and every species in the chamber knew what was coming. Humanity had won the war. They could demand anything. Territory, resources, the complete subjugation of the Vorton Empire. They could do to the Vortons exactly what the Vortons had tried to do to them. "Humanity demands no Vorton territory," Rachel said clearly. "We seek no reparations. We will not occupy your worlds or dictate your government's policies." Confused whispers rippled through the chamber. Thorne's eyes widened in genuine shock. This was unprecedented. In galactic history, victors always took from the defeated. Always. "What we demand is simple," Rachel continued. "A guarantee. A promise from every species represented in this council that humanity's right to exist peacefully will be recognized and protected. That no one will ever again attack human civilians without provocation." She displayed images of New Haven before the attack. Children playing in parks under an alien sun. families having dinner together. People living ordinary, peaceful lives. We didn't want this war. We wanted to explore, to learn, to build friendships across the stars. The Vortons took that choice from us. Don't let it happen again. President Mitchell Davis appeared via holographic projection from Earth. The galaxy operates on assumptions about power and technology. You assumed humanity was weak because we're new to space travel. You thought our small territory meant we were insignificant. Every assumption was wrong. General Amanda Price added, "We won this war not because we're stronger than the Vortons. We're not. Not because we have better technology. We don't. We won because we refused to accept the limitations everyone thought defined us. We adapted. We learned. We exceeded every boundary you believed would contain us." Counselor Vex spoke carefully, aware that every word mattered. "Ambassador Hayes, the Council accepts your terms completely. We will draft a treaty immediately, recognizing human sovereignty and protecting human space from aggression. But I must ask, why show mercy? Your military could easily eliminate the remaining Vorton forces." Rachel's expression softened slightly. "Because that's not who we are. We fight when we must, and we fight harder than anyone expects. But we don't fight for conquest or revenge. We fight to protect what we love. That's the difference between us and those who attacked us." The vote was unanimous. Every species agreed to the Treaty of Theron's Gate. The document was drafted within hours, with representatives from 47 civilizations adding their seals. Admiral Thorne was given a choice between execution by his own government and permanent exile. He chose exile, spending the rest of his life on a remote colony as a living reminder of what happens when arrogance replaces wisdom. As the session ended, a new message arrived from the precursors. This one was addressed specifically to humanity. Rachel received it in a private chamber, watching as the ancient being's form materialized before her. "You heard our warning," the precursor said, its voice like wind through ancient canyons. "You understood what others did not." "You weren't trying to protect just us," Rachel replied. "You were trying to protect everyone. You knew what would happen if someone pushed us into a corner." "Correct. Your species possesses a rare trait. You exceed limits when survival demands it. This makes you dangerous in conflict but invaluable in peace. We warned the Vortons hoping to prevent exactly what occurred." Rachel leaned forward. "Why are humans different? What makes us this way?" The precursor's form shifted, almost like it was considering how to explain. "Most species in this galaxy evolved to fit within stable boundaries. They optimized for predictable environments. Humanity evolved on a world that constantly changed. Ice ages that remade continents. Climate shifts that transformed ecosystems. Natural disasters that forced constant adaptation. Your ancestors survived by refusing to accept any limitation as permanent. That trait runs deep in your species' memory. So we're dangerous. You're adaptable. That can be beautiful or terrifying depending on circumstances. The galaxy needs species who refuse to accept that things must always remain the same. Just try not to terrify everyone while you reshape the universe." The precursor faded, leaving Rachel alone with her thoughts. Across human space, life slowly returned to something resembling normal. Colonies rebuilt with help from other species who suddenly wanted to be humanity's friend. Families mourned their dead and honored their sacrifices. The military remained ready, but the immediate threat had passed. Captain Lisa Morgan returned to Earth, her fighter finally retired after too many impossible missions. She started teaching at the new Aerospace Academy, training the next generation of pilots. Her first class always began the same way. "Everything they tell you is impossible is just something nobody's figured out how to do yet. Your job is to figure it out." Captain David Turner went back to civilian shipping, but now he moved through the galaxy as a respected figure. Vorton ships gave him wide clearance, not from fear but from hard-earned respect for the man who'd starved an empire into submission. Dr. Nathan Foster continued his research, now funded by a dozen different alien governments who wanted to understand how humanity had advanced so quickly. He kept some secrets though. Some advantages were worth protecting. And in schools, meeting halls and military academies across the galaxy, a new phrase entered common usage. When someone faced an impossible challenge, when conventional wisdom said something couldn't be done, people began saying, "Remember what the humans did." The Vorton Empire became a cautionary tale. The story was taught to every new species joining the Galactic Council. The lesson was simple but powerful. Never underestimate another species' capacity to surprise you. Never assume your understanding of limits applies to everyone. And most importantly, Never ignore warnings from those who've lived long enough to recognize patterns you can't see. Humanity took its place among the stars not as conquerors but as the species that had proven something profound. The most dangerous enemy isn't one with superior weapons or advanced technology. It's an enemy that refuses to accept defeat, that learns from every setback, that exceeds every limit you think defines them. The phrase, "they exceed limits," became humanity's unofficial motto, spoken with pride by humans and with respect by everyone else. Because the Vortons had learned, too late, what the precursors had tried to warn them about. When you push humanity to their limits, they don't break. They don't surrender. They just prove that limits were never real in the first place. They show you that the only true limitation is believing something is impossible. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Humanity would never be underestimated again. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the precursors watched and waited, wondering what other boundaries these remarkable humans would exceed in the centuries to come. Because if there was one thing the galaxy now understood, it was this: humanity doesn't ask what's possible. They decide what's necessary and make it possible. That's what makes them special. That's what makes them dangerous. That's what makes them human.